All right, welcome to Office Hours. One of the questions this week about how do I limit certain authors to doing different stuff in the workstation so that they're not in there mucking up stuff they don't belong in, otherwise making a mess. And so we have all sorts of functionality inside of Titan to both limit the interface, limit what you get to see, limit which content you can do, and actually limit the freeform editor. So to turning all sorts of stuff on. And we have prepared just a little demo to talk about that. So why don't we just jump right in? What do you got here for us, John?
Sure. On the screen, I've actually got two different browsers open here, and I'm going to flip between them as we go through this. But right now, I'm logged into the workstation as two different users, essentially, in two different browsers. This interface is giving you, or this one, I'm logged in as a demo user that only has access to one or two pages and a couple file folders. And so what happens when you're logged in that fashion is you'll oftentimes see the lock on a page. The lock is just indicating this page is read-only right now because you don't have permission to author or even edit or approve this item, but you do have permission to something under here, and so then you can expand the tree and get to the things you do have permission to. And the easy way to remember how you set it up is workflow equals workstation security, workflow workstation. It's always a matter of updating the workflow settings to control whether a user has author rights, editor rights, admin rights to something, and that will control whether or not they see it in the tree in the workstation. And frankly, it'll control whether or not they can log into the workstation at all most of the time. There's other ways you can restrict a user to maybe just the admin side or smart search or something, but you typically need author rights over some page in the tree, so then in order to get access and log in. The other interface in here in the workflow tab, let's see if I can expand this a little bit. You can see on this sample one page for workflow, I've got authors, editors, admins, and I'm set up as an author. Now you'll also see it's grayed out over here. I'm logged in as demo author, who is a member of this group, NWS authors. But I'm only an author. Authors don't have a whole lot of rights. They can't even change workflow settings, right? So these are grayed out for me. It's just giving me an indication of, yep, you're able to see this item because you have access as an author. The other interface, I'll quick show this. This is similar. This user is what it's called, but it's logged in and it's been configured to use our novice interface. We have a setting in the user management screen, which we'll show in a second, that lets you say, well, whether or not this user account has access to all the features of the system or just a few of the features of the system. Maybe they're just getting started. Maybe you don't want them to do too much damage. You can make them a novice user and they get less things. And so you'll see, you can kind of see in the split screen here above, there's all these different tabs, the more and all the other options here, but the limited interface doesn't have those. It only has, access to the content tab and the properties tab when you're browsing through. In fact, you can see they don't even see the file folders in the tree. So really have restricted what they're allowed to interact with in the tree and what they're able to do as far as, making adjustments to content. So should we take a step back, Pat, and show how that's set up?
Yep, we should. Do that. And then we can go and show the freeform differences too also.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll come back and do that. All right, so if I log out of this user and just give even a broader sense of what's going on and log in as webmaster gets to see everything. This is the same environment and you can see there is a lot of stuff in this environment that, those other two users are not seeing. But setting up users and making these types of changes happens across a couple different areas in the system, but first and foremost, we'll check into the user management section. In user management, this is where you have access to create users, update their passwords, disable them, modify security settings. So here you can see we recently created these two new users, demo user or demo author, limit author. Demo author, I mean, the tabs are fairly self-explanatory. These are, demographics, name, address, phone number, information about their account, when it was set up, who it was created by, what are they allowed to log into the workstation. Here's the preference level. We call it reduced interface or full. So they have the full interface enabled right now, this demo author. If I take a look at the limited author as a comparison, you can see here they're indicating reduced. So this is the way that we control whether or not they get items to see. But as far as their access level, that's controlled with a combination of things. The security tab here, this is essentially saying what users and groups this account is assigned to. It's part of the everyone group and a group called NWS authors. And so let's see, if I was to go here, you can see both demo author and limit author were added as members of this NWS authors group. That's super convenient from a user management perspective, because now I could say, I'm going to make NWS authors an author, and then as time goes on, whoever I add to that group is getting the access by virtue of being in that group. Then I don't have to onesie twosie assign users to pages. But that's the second aspect, and we'll talk about that next. So once you have a user and you've got them in a group or not, and you want to control what they are getting access to in the tree, that's handled per item in the tree. So we'll go back to the content tab and expand out public site. Services was one of the pages that we could see in the other interface. See public site services, public site services. So we'll take a look at the services page. From the webmaster's perspective, the workflow tab is where you control this access. And we were looking at this before, but now you can see that these are interactive. I can make changes to who the authors and editors and item administrators are for the services page. If I wanted to say, oh, here, even we've got, that was a little bit redundant. So NWS authors includes limit author. So technically we don't need this one, but you can have it there, either way. I can also come along and say, expand this up here. If there were other users, is there probably a test user of some kind? There we go. So these are other user accounts in the system. I can filter through them, kind of like a tag, locate the user or group. There's a test group. We'll add that in there. We'll make them authors. And so all of the changes now to this, they take effect on save. So I could hit save, and then anybody in this test group would then see this item in the tree when they log in if they couldn't before. I kind of went through that quickly, I know, but does that all make sense?
That's good. All right, you following all this?
Reset children checkbox, John.
Oh, sure. One of the aspects of the way we control security, it's supposed to be per item. Well, a lot of times you're like, okay, I got this whole branch of nodes in the tree that I want somebody to have access to, right? The whole services branch of the tree. Maybe there's a group of people that are just responsible for that section of our content. I want the whole branch to be set the same as far as who's got access in the workstation. So reset children to these settings is the way to propagate down through the tree from this point down the same settings based on what's configured here. So there's probably some differences. In fact, let's see if I can, save. No, don't save the changes. I just want to show this with a little bit different light, because workflow is one of the things you can change in a multi-tag and edit type of fashion, right? Imagine that the items I've checked are strewn all over the tree, not direct children of one node, right? Let's say it's there. I did a search and came back with a whole bunch of things, and now I'm interacting with them all. Well, workflow should show you in this type of edit interface, it makes a little more sense because you're resetting children to these settings. Well, that means it's going to go through each individual one and check all their children and make them the same settings, right? I was hoping that they had different values.
But they don't, yeah.
To illustrate this a little bit better. What if I do this? What if I say like this, I'm doing a little bit of hand waving here, so I apologize for it being kind of quick. But now one of the nodes should be different if I go like that. Perfect. Okay, this is what I wanted to see. So you can see how the box is kind of this gray filled in. It's saying all of the checked items have NWS authors because it's the solid green check mark, but they're not all exactly the same with respect to this limit author user. That's what this is illustrating, is that some of the items are like this and others aren't. Well, you can check this and toggle between the different states as a way to kind of reset, kind of get everything back in alignment with the way that you want it. And if you check reset children, you get some extra notes here. Hey, we're going to go through and change all these settings on the, and it's telling you here, hey, the ones with the solid check are going to be added, and the ones that, the gray check will not be added. So you get a little bit more information as you go through the interface, but that's what that's for. You get similar information about those visuals in the help under the workflow role help. It'll show you what the green, blue, and red indicators all mean.
Brian, any questions so far? All right.
So, okay, so then let's talk a little bit more about the limited interface, the reduced interface. I know I'm using different terms, but they all kind of mean the same thing. What else are we stripping out of the UI for that reduced / novice interface? I'll log back out and back in as limit author. I don't know. All right. And if I try to do my little split screen here, in this other browser, we are just the demo author, but still able to see everything in the full interface. The full interface gives you essentially all the tabs and all the blocks. But the reduced interface, which is configurable, there's an XML file that we can modify and change to add and remove certain aspects, features of the system. But by default, you're only allowed to create two types of block, a freeform and a TOC. They were the most general examples of a block when we kind of came up with this notion, but freeform is obviously probably the most common block in everybody's. So a novice user can create freeforms and they can create TOCs. They can edit blocks that are on a page that they have access to, no problem, including filters and data lists and all the things. But for creating new ones, they'll have access to the content library and then those two default blocks. For the freeform block in particular, you can see here, if you're familiar with the freeform interface, this seems like a lot less icons than I normally see. Yeah, well, that is true. So if I flip back here and look at this one, yep, here's the
three lines of icons. Yep.
Yep, 3 lines of icons. The ability to switch into source mode and work with the HTML directly. Things like the spell check as you type, and a lot of these other nuances of the editor are available when you're in full mode, but not available for reduced mode. And the intent there is, if somebody's just getting involved and hasn't had a full set of training yet, maybe we just give them a little bit less options as far as what they can change and work with. And you can kind of, and my screen, hopefully it's similar for you guys. You can see the difference. We took out striking through and subscripts and superscripts and block quotes and the various alignment options.
Video.
Yep. But the video option. But we kept images and links because those are integrated, the ability to link to another page in the system or to add imagery, that type of thing is very common. Another thing that is notably gone are the things you can change with respect to usage and colors and some of those stylistic elements. We keep the novice interface reduced out of that. You get access to the styles that can be hooked up in Titan admin and some of the heading styles, H1, H2. but not the ability to change the font to something else, or the size of the font, or the background color, or the text color. Those options are not available in the reduced interface.
And that can be configured if with a customization.
Correct.
But you can pick which things you want to show up in the freeform editor.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really nice. It just kind of like makes the, that novice user kind of adhere to whatever branding standards you have in place. So that's awesome.
Right.
And lots of opportunities not to make a mess.
Yeah.
Right. Which they have those same options,
Yeah.
Hopefully they can stick to those fewer options,
Right.
Okay, just work with the H2s and 3s, and
Yep.
please don't put Comic Sans in, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but
If
yeah.
you with the content library too, they is another great way to conform and enforce styles. Tell them to pick stuff out of the content library.
Yep.
Right.
All right.
The one thing, the source mode, maybe you guys don't, maybe you aren't in source mode maybe as much as I am, but if I was a
I'm in
novice,
source mode all the time.
yeah. So that's a nice one to keep in the full interface probably too. So anyway.
All right. So Ryan, we kind of went through the two different ways you can set this up. It's all configured through workflow and assigning workflow rights to different users. Questions on that? Anything? Does this answer what you were looking for?
Yeah, this has been great so far.
Did you know that this stuff existed already?
Not really. I just kind of pretty much the story behind it is we have our HR wanted to have these pages available to the people within the factory that don't have an email address, a company email address, but they still need to supply that some information to them. So they have a system in place where they can text them if they needed a link to then go to a page that has some information on it. And I pretty much I was like, there's got to be a way to all right, well, I can give some users access, from HR access to Titan, but I only want them to be able to edit, this one or two landing pages. And so rather than, they can give me the information and I can update it, but then there might be times when I'm not in the office, or if
Sure.
can't quite get to the request fast enough. So that's what kind of got me first looking into it and then discovering it. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, let me make sure that I'm using this the best way possible. So I've just kind of been poking around a little bit, but not really doing too much else. So I just wanted to really make sure that I was understanding the full breadth of its capabilities.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's another nuance to it that may be helpful, maybe not in your specific use case, but it just dawned on me. Part of the workflow options we have, there's a notification tool. Say you have an author make some updates, and you don't really want them to go live to the site right away. You want them to go through somebody who's going to do the proofing and make sure they didn't choose Comic Sans and all that stuff. Right. The way that works in the system, you'd have to also, you need a couple things.
Yep.
Let me back up here and log back in as a webmaster, because so the other aspect of that, if I go back to the workflow tab, first is what kind of workflow are you using, right? No workflow 1, 2, 3, 4. If for anybody who's not really super familiar with workflow, this is telling you how many times somebody has to publish this thing before it's actually live. That's kind of like the shortcut description. If it's no workflow, okay, well, anytime somebody saves or publishes, those changes go right out to the display. Most people for content pages use one-step workflow, so that way they can save and have those working changes like in progress, but not live until somebody hits publish.
Gotcha. Yeah, I believe most of our pages are set up currently like that.
Most of the pages are set up with one-step workflow?
Yeah, the one-step workflow.
Okay.
the thing you'll see more commonly using zero workflow are files, right? You got imagery out in the file pile. Oh, okay. If I updated the version of that, well, I want the change to go live right away, or I upload something new. I want it to be available right away. So most of the time, files are or no workflow. Data records also very much, very commonly are configured with no workflow. So any change like makes an update right away. Well, the more times, the more steps, the more published steps you have, the more opportunities for connecting individuals to the different roles. For example, with one step, an author just has to hit publish and it's going to be live. There's no editor step, right? You'd have to go into two-step or more to have options for an editor 1, an editor 2, or an editor 3 to be able to inject these extra steps in the process of getting content changed and then live to the display. So if you were to do something where somebody was authoring and then somebody was approving, that's a minimum of two-step workflow, because then that's how you would indicate a different user in the system as being the editor responsible for approving the content changes. Now, the notification aspect of that is handled through a background job. Background jobs are a way that we have for running like little utilities on a scheduled basis. And one of the available jobs that comes in the system is called, I think it's called workflow notification. Let's quick switch over to Titan Admin and take a look. So in Titan Admin, under scheduled jobs, if you click that, you'll get a description of all the different jobs. It's called status emailer. This job sends status emails regarding the workflow states of content items. So we got to scroll through this list and find status emailer. And in most, this is a development environment, so not super relevant, but in your production environment or somewhere, you might have a job configured that runs, I don't know, every half hour or less, right? Depending on how frequent you want the updates to go out. But the configuration of this job is essentially, hey, which types of workflow notification do you want to go out? Do you want people to be notified when there are current open workflows, like which is documents awaiting approval? Let's see if I can expand this out. This also includes the notifications when if you had a user registration feature on your display, like somebody's wants access, to an extranet or something, they might request a login. You can get notifications about those. But on the workflow side of it, you can get notified about documents that are expiring and when there's a document waiting approval. And the long and short of it is, if there's an item that is in the state waiting for approval, we figure out what users are connected to those editor states. And if they have an email address, then they get an email that says, hey, you've got some items that are waiting approval. And you can deep link into the workstation from that email and review and hit publish. That's essentially it. But it runs on a schedule. You set it up to run on a schedule so that you're not getting flooded with emails, maybe once an hour or every half hour is probably reasonable for most environments if they're going to use it at all. The other place that tends to be useful to see these things, if you don't want to worry about a notification email process, you can have people, make a focus of their Titan work, is to look at the dashboard widgets. On the main dashboard, you have all these little widgets. Well, one of them will be pages awaiting review or needing review. And I think expiring is somewhat like that. But these three widgets will be representing to you items that are kind of in your queue to deal with, right?
Okay. Yeah, I see that.
Cool. So then to get that configured with email, John, you would have to set up your email server. So there's a little bit of configuration done, which you're not going to do right now, but to make sure that whatever mail server you had in that XML file is active
Right.
to receive emails.
Right.
Okay.
Typically, if you have forms on your display where
Mhm.
somebody's getting a notification email when a form gets filled out on the site,
Yeah.
it's the same configuration for the email server that's being used for that. So there are
Okay.
fields in that configuration XML that
Mhm.
need to be, tweaked to match. But yeah,
Gotcha.
I think there was a field. I suppose I can go back to it for indicating who the email is from. So you're going to want
Right.
it to be from a webmaster at yourwebsite.com or whatever it is,
Yeah.
or a valid SMTP account. If it's going through your own SMTP server, that type of thing.
Gotcha.
Um, yeah, the XSL, that's a bit of code that we've got for formatting the message that goes out in the email. But yeah, there's a mail server, so whatever the SMTP server is, a lot. If it's if it's a hosted environment, we know what that configuration needs to be, and if it's not set up, we
Yeah.
can easily get it set up,
Okay.
that type of thing.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Other questions, Ryan?
So if I did want to get that emailer, just send in a request for that then to you guys.
Yep. Yeah, if you go through your typical support channel with we'll get a ticket in the system and somebody should be able to set that up really quickly.
Perfect. Awesome.
Yeah, JJ, it's on. I think that's on something that gets onto her radar occasionally. She can coordinate all that.
Yep.
All right, Skylar, you had joined us. I don't know if you had any questions for John or I.
Not really. I was kind of just checking out what kind of happens in these secret backdoor meetings. And,
Secret backroom meetings.
yeah,
Smoke
All the good
cigars.
stuff, man.
Forgot our cigars today.
I can definitely sort of try to generate some and get some around for the next go, I think.
Yeah, it's anything you want. So take a deep dive into any particular area. We have lots of questions about security and access. The content library has been a frequent thing. People are really taking advantage of that. So, there's literally hundreds of places inside of Titan where you could take a deep dive.
Yeah.
Jobs. So we're here. The
Awesome.
professors are in office, ready to go. Mostly the professor. So
Yeah, the new one, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but the multi-block where you blocks inside a block, section block, I think might be
Yes.
what it's called.
Yeah.
Looks super cool, so I'm excited to see that.
We are
Yeah.
working diligently. So any feedback or things, what are you trying to accomplish with that? What would you use it for?
It's just kind of used to in some other CMSs, primarily what I used in the past was WordPress. They have like some of those builders that do same things where you set up a column and then you set it as a 50/50 column and then you embed blocks inside of those. So seeing where you can go with some of those to maybe hit a couple other design use cases. Yeah, I think that's probably the primary.
Yeah. I mean, the system supports it generally today. It's just certain aspects of the styling are a challenge. A lot of the times, I'll say the big impetus for doing it was when our front end team came along and said, it's really challenging for us to do background images,
Yeah.
right? Because we can't do this. And there's a way to create blocks sequentially and say this block has this style for a stripe and the next one has the same style for a stripe, and my code goes, oh hey, they got them in a row, I got to do all this.
Right.
So there's
Yeah.
rigmarole that has to happen to make it work right, so it's not completely obvious in the UI. So the main hope is that the section block reduces that confusion in the UI by just doing, oh, okay, well, the section is going to be my stripe and it's going to be styled like this, and here are the blocks that are in it. And I think that will become pretty evident. It's still going to work. Everybody's that's doing stripes the way that we're doing them now, they're still going to work. They don't have to convert to section block unless there was a whole bunch of extra custom code added to make the background image thing, work the way we wanted to. But yeah, that's kind of the idea behind it. And I think
Yeah,
yeah.
I have run into that actually, now that you mentioned that. And yeah, they have to do I do a little bit of custom CSS just kind of based on where we're at. And I kind of inherited the system, so I kind of have to do things my way sometimes.
Sure.
And
Mhm.
it's like, yeah, I have to do some wild trickery. But yeah, that would simplify it quite a bit. So
Yeah. If you ever want to
That's
take
what we're hoping.
dive into code or any dev stuff or CSS stuff too, we send us some questions and thoughts, and happy to take deep dives into more technical stuff.
Cool.
If that's your jam. All right. I don't know if anybody else, Audrey, had any other questions either?
I had a random question I ran into. It's probably a quick, but I found that when looking at the back end code on our website that we have like a header that, you click on a page and it automatically like products. It'll come up with a products type thing. I found that on most pages that is already considered our H1. So when creating pages, I just wanted to confirm we don't need to be using H1 if that's considered the H1, correct?
Right. And
Okay.
it happens. It's unique per design in a lot of ways. Some clients will say, hey, we want full control over this H1, meaning they want to put it as a block on each page that needs it, and so that they control the text. Before, people were commonly asking for that. It was more often the case that the name of the page that they created in the tree was the name that they wanted in the H1, and it's in the meta tag title and all the stuff in the back end. So we would build the layout to use a specific control that just, merged in that name of the page and into those things that made it the H1, so that people didn't have to do this extra content step. But from time to time, we have people that would rather just make their own H1. But it sounds like you are using kind of that standard title bar approach. It's going to take the title of the page and make it the H1 and make it the title, and then you don't have to have an extra H1 in your content. Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Very specific to each layout, each template, each theme.
Yep.
And that was a design decision made early on.
Yep.
Ryan.
Yeah, going back to the workflow stuff, I thought was there something you mentioned about like limiting file pile access for certain users?
So yes, I mean, any item, I'll try to refine my language. Any doc ID in our system, so that's a page, a folder, a file, like an image file or a video file or a PDF, or any data record, they all are assigned a doc ID, and any doc ID can be restricted via workflow. So file piles are just like globes in that way. So if they have, in my example environment here, if there were, this user images folder. If this user images folder has a workflow setting that restricts access, right now it looks like you can see it, the public user can see it, and previous authors. Well, let's say, for the sake of this, I only want those NWS authors to see that folder. Making this change in the workflow, I'll save it. And now if I log out and log in as that limit author, should be, okay. This is what this is a good point of this demo.
Okay.
The limited author is using the reduced interface. The reduced interface by default only shows content pages. It doesn't show file. It doesn't show data records.
Gotcha.
Right? So if I log back out of here and instead in as a different user, I was a demo author. This was a user using the full interface that was part of that group. So now they see files, group, here's that user images folder. So if full interface reduced, then they can see files, data records, all be based on that workflow setting, just like pages.
Gotcha. All right. That clears that up.
Lots of different ways to configure it. If you get into a situation where you're trying to set something up specific and it's not quite working, then give us a call. It's quick, hopefully kind of quick answers. We can show you how to do that.
Right. Like this data site, I feel like this could be another way to show this. I'll make NWS authors an author over this whole data site. Save that. And now if I was to log in back in as the demo author, the hope and dream is that it works the way it ought to work. And there now blogs is in the list. And so before I didn't even have access to this, and you can see I don't have access to the 30 or 40 other ones that were in there when I was logged in as webmaster. So.
All right. Well, if there's no other questions, save up your questions and send them in next time. You're all welcome back. Office hours are here for your convenience. It's a way to have an outreach for us and then connect with what's going on out in the field. So you're talking to the top dog here at Northwoods with as far as where Titan is going. And so lots of times we get filtered. We hear information filtered through our account directors and the people that you talk to day to day. We don't always have direct access to Jon. So we try to put the office hours together with the express purpose of letting us hear what's going on out in the field, our ears to the ground, and be able to answer questions and get a sense for what's important to you guys. So save up your questions, send them in, tell your friends, tell them to buy Titan and submit their questions. So thanks everybody for coming today, and I hope to see you again soon.